Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. All right. Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen, and I am pastor of the village. And across from me is Andy Littleton, who is pastor of Mission. We're headed on a big retreat soon.
Yeah, we'll see you in the morning.
See each other in the morning. We're headed to El Paso to hang out with a bunch of other pastors and make big decisions. But we just talked about the environment and about discipleship, and I think this is our lightning round. Obviously, we're missing any of those special producers because they haven't, jumped on there and clicked the support thing.
It's a lot of pressure to be an inside producer.
It is.
I was thinking, I don't even know if I'm ready for it.
Yeah. I didn't. I was going to ask you to kind of step down as an inside producer.
Fine, please.
I feel like you're overpaid.
Yeah.
But anyway, so if you want to support us, or if you don't want to, but feel that this is the one thing that God has put in front of you to do, then please help support us. We would love to not have to pay $18 a month to put this up, because it's a
burden.
It's a burden.
Okay. Well, there you go.
We love you. This is a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to ask us questions and have us lightning round it, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Approved.
All right.
Well, we got to jump right in.
Right. Lightning round for Faith Over Breakfast.
So here's what I just wanted to, hey, it's a quick breakfast with you. Look, it's so quick.
I'm removing my keys from the table.
Thank you. Please. Oh, thanks. So quick you have coffee exchange coffee. That says something.
I've been up since 5:30.
Good job. That's great. Okay. So it snowed here again the other day. It
snowed on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
It's snowing in California.
And I was coming back from New Mexico, and it snowed really hard on our way out, but that wasn't quite as surprising. But I just wanted to talk about the weather.
Let's talk about the weather.
Just kind of, wow, the snow. And then, but look here, as pastors, it used to be, when we were getting started, if you were a pastor that talked about environmental issues, you were immediately categorized real fast.
As a left-wing progressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe your theology is a little light and weak.
Yeah, maybe you don't believe in Jesus or that he died on the cross.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so but I have noticed opinions shifting because it just seems to be evident that the weather's been different.
Or at least there's some good confirmation bias built into things.
There's good confirmation bias, but
I mean, if you're looking for it, you can find it.
Yeah. But also the weather's been different. I mean, we had the rainiest summer in 100 years.
Yeah, but that means 100 years ago there was a rainier summer.
Yeah. But in our lifetime.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that the weather isn't crazy or that things aren't shifting.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Yeah. So what do you think? This is exactly the conversation I wanted to have.
What do I think about the environment? Well, I think that
the crazy weather,
I think God gave us the responsibility to take care of our earth, and that I am not one of those people that when it says that God is creating new heavens and new earth, that I think that it means a complete destruction of this. I believe it is a renewal of what he has created and to bring it back to what it was called to. But that we play a part in that because we have been given a rule over this world, right? We're supposed to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth.
Subdue the earth, it would be also a big part of that would be to take care of it.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. No, I would completely argue that. I think when I first got married to my wife, we were very much environmentalists in the very classic sense. And we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to have the smallest footprint
Yeah. But in your case, you've kind of got big feet.
I got big feet, so it was very difficult.
Yeah.
And what we discovered is it's almost impossible to live as a first world person and not hurt the environment in many different ways.
The idea that you're going to be righteous in this, and what I mean by that is that you're going to cut out all the things that hurt the environment. Good luck. I mean, you think you're doing it buying an electric car. No, you're not, because the lithium, the way it's mined is unjust, and that's not really that sustainable. And plus all the other components in that car are made out of things that are, my point is, if becoming a righteous person this way is the goal, you'll just be depressed. You will not, you'll not get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so it's not just then my footprint, but also my footprint as it affects other people, more in other countries than in my own. How the burden that I place on them for the lifestyle that I live. So there's that aspect of things that is very difficult to kind of manage. And then you just look around, and because there's a lot of information, and we usually are looking. It's interesting in environmental sciences. We look at the last 100 years, 150 years. We rarely take a look at the last 10,000 years when we're talking about these things.
Oh, yeah. There's been all kinds of continents drifting and ice age. And
forget it. I mean, just the last 10,000 years has been kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, but when you have 7 billion people and on Earth, and then you have an ability to communicate instantly, you have this buildup of information. I would argue that confirmation bias about whatever you think is much more likely to happen when you have more information. Oddly enough, when you if you think you hit a certain flat line where you're gonna you're gonna say, "Hey, I have this preponderance of evidence," and so it doesn't really solve a lot of problems.
No doubt.
So I would say that snowing in California, earthquakes in Turkey, et cetera, is evidence that the earth is groaning under the weight of sin, and it is not operating in the way it should. Does that mean that we are near the end? I don't know.
Right.
Partly what I was struck by reading Galatians chapter 1 3 days ago. I don't know when I was reading it. And Paul's giving his testimony basically in Galatians 1 and talking through things. And one of the things is he gets confirmed by John and Peter that he's encouraged to do is not to forget the poor.
Yeah.
Right? It's very fascinating to me because part of it, I think what the early church is saying is don't forget what's right in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get so caught up in the larger narrative that you miss the actual effects of sin right in front of your face.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up like the end. I wasn't even thinking about that. I mentioned that we went through 1 Thessalonians recently, and that seems to be the message of 1 Thessalonians. People are wondering if the end is going to come, maybe more for spiritual reasons in that book. But Paul seems to tell them, go to work, do your normal things, do the things that we've commanded you. Don't live any different. That sounds like what you're saying right here. And I think that it's interesting because secular and religious people both fear the end just for different reasons. Religious people fear that God's had enough and he's going to strike us, generally. And secular people fear that we've screwed it up so bad that it's going to all fall apart. And I just did a sermon on Noah and was kind of suggesting that it's always both. But then what really the bigger question is, whose voice do you trust in the midst of it all? And so with Noah, it wasn't like the earth's I don't think the big question was like, God's judgment is coming, Noah, hurry up and build your boat so that you don't get hurt. It's going to be really bad for everybody. Get on your boat. I mean, it was something, but God designed a way of salvation for Noah that was very much of God and not of himself. That's why all the stinking instructions are there for the boat and stuff, for the ark. And the thing was, Noah, will you will you listen to my way through this or your own? And my suggestion was everybody on earth in the time of Noah was looking for the same relief from the trouble of sin as Noah was. They were just looking for it in all these different ways, and ways that actually ended up becoming idolatry. So they were increasingly looking for relief by killing one another, looking for relief by drinking their sorrows away, whatever the case. So I see a similar thing today where whether I think Christians are starting to wonder about the weather, which in a way that I didn't used to see, but there's also all is this the birth pains before the end, which, technically every day we're a little bit closer.
So yes, it is the birth pains.
So it is, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then secular people are like, oh no, we've blown it. We had one too many fossil fuel vehicles, and we've tipped the scales, and California's gonna flood, and which some of that might happen, sure. And that's that. And I think I would say to that is the effect of sin and idolatry, because all the ways that we consume and trample the poor and don't care for the earth, why do we do those things? Idolatry. Something is more important to us than doing what God called us to do, and more than God himself.
Yeah.
And that actually does lead to things like littering and greenhouse emissions, and as well as lying, cheating, stealing, murder, right?
Yeah.
And building altars to fake gods, all of it.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, the biggest question, I think, as in the days of Noah, is, so since this is not unknown to God, which is the hope that the Christian has, so what has he asked us to do? Yeah. What's his voice saying to do? And it's not freak out, yell at people, don't talk to anybody anymore, hunker down and wait for the rapture. That's actually just never said, ever. No matter how you view those things occurring, it's like you said, do the basics of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you should also, probably not throw your trash on the side of the road, because God's called us to take care of the earth. That's one of the basics.
Well, and I think one of the important parts, and I think this is hard for people, is when it comes to submission, I'm supposed to submit to my government. And so if my government says recycle, even if my government is taking that blue thing of recycling and not recycling it, I'm still called in my space to do what they ask me to do, which is to properly put my recycling in there, try to do my best to recycle. And if I have an opportunity wherever I am to further recycling,
to go beyond that,
then do that. I mean, like if that's, I hold a job or a position there or an influence there, then I need to do that.
Don't you think one of the things that gets in our way is we think it's just not making a difference? And so, and I think that's one of the problems we all have in just following Jesus, is you try, you do it, and you feel like it's not really making a difference. If I went and took things in my own hands, maybe it'd make a bigger difference than trusting and following Jesus. And some of that following Jesus is doing an environmental or doing stewarding the earth in a way that doesn't really seem to
be having an impact.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, so I forget where I read this, but there was a study done as to why, the question was asked was, why did the French Revolution fail long term and the American Revolution succeed? And what they discovered was that the American Revolution, and Americans typically, and you can see this even now, is that Americans are able to gather during crisis without hierarchy and take care of things. And they've done this you see any crisis in the world, like Americans quickly gather and take care of things, but then they just all go back to, even if they disagree with each other completely in their political views, then they go back home and they disagree with each other and go live a different life.
Which I read a book about ancient civilizations, by the way, and that's not that. So there were ancient civilizations that acted this way.
Yes, this gathering together. So what? It's fascinating. I think, and this is kind of what I concluded in reading this, is that Americans are crisis oriented. I remember there's an engineer here in our church, and he said, here's the difference between, like, you can see the difference of American engineers versus all other engineers in World War II. So you come to a river and you can't cross it. And the French are sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to build a bridge, how we're going to do this. And all other nations have these different approaches where Americans drive up and they look at the river and they're like, all right, we're going to drive all 6 of our trucks into this. It'll make a bridge and everybody drive over. And the Americans have their entire army across the river long before the other armies are just trying to figure out how to build a bridge. And this is how Americans tend to think about things, is how do we just quickly get this job done? And so we're crisis-oriented people. So if there's a crisis, and this is why now we're looking at the weather and maybe there's a crisis. What action do we need to take to solve this crisis so we can all go back to our ordinary,
which is why other countries have been thinking about this for decades.
Right.
But we're just going, hold on.
Yeah, and also
it snowed. This is weird.
Yeah, we also don't produce. I mean, in one way, we consume a lot more than everybody else, but we don't produce the same kinds of emission issues as, say, China or.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to that. Like when I was in Chicago, Brock's Candy relocated to South America.
Oh, and we're moving things. Yeah.
One of the trouble, it's great that we have these environmental policies, but we're also, in doing so, companies are just operating out of places that don't have them, which just boosts those other countries' issues, and that's partly our fault.
Well, and the thing that's hard for me, and I think we have to wrestle with this, and I mean, you have to pick the thing that you can deal with. But for instance, if you carry an iPhone, then you are accepting that there are 30 slaves that were used basically per iPhone for you. And so when you carry that, you better carry it with a little bit more respect for your phone and for what you have in your hand.
And some humility. That you're not doing the right thing all the time, right?
And you may want to rethink your iPhone. Maybe. But my point being is you got to understand that everything you do as a first world person in the United States has an oppressive impact on people in this world.
Because getting your Android isn't going to fix it, nor your Motorola flip phone, by the way.
Or even your light phone, if you guys are wanting to go for
it. No, you're not. You're still the oppressed people probably made a critical amount of parts for that too.
Yeah,
and so it's hard because this is where I talk about the righteousness side of it. I am actually for trying to make decisions in which you have the least environmental impact and you care for the earth. But to think that you are going to get to this place where you no longer feed the beast, you're not.
No.
Like, so the righteousness, and this is key to the Christian message, is out of reach for you.
Yes.
That now, without the good news of the gospel, that would just lead most of us to go, well, then why try?
Yeah.
But underneath the good news of the gospel, that there is a grace that covers over all of your failures from a good God who still desires that you obey and care.
Right.
You can say, well, I can't get righteousness, but I can still keep trying because grace covers over all the failures.
Yes, and I just want to go back to this because we're talking about the environmental world. I think I think we are in a time where God is at least turning things over, or is asking Christians to begin to return, not to the first century church in the sense of we're all going to go to house churches and devote ourselves to the teachings of the apostles, and but to a first century mindset of, we are a different kingdom, and if we live our lives out holistically as a different kingdom, we will transform our culture. We'll transform it environmentally. We'll transform the way they look at the poor. And it has this, if you look back at history, we've done that, but I think we've flatlined, and it is time for a resetting of us as followers of Jesus in a more, I would say, I think a more committed way. Particularly American Christians. I think we are being called to a new thing. I think I would not call it, like we've been talking about Asbury, I would not call that a revival. I would call that revivals are things that happen over a long period of time. So we don't know if it's a revival, but it is a renewal and an outpouring of the Holy Spirit on young people. I think that's going to happen more. I think we're called to a fuller, more rich, deep, sacrificial discipleship than we
in all areas.
In all areas.
And so that would be what I'm one thing I'm grateful for that has changed since my early ministry days is I think that divide that said, oh, this is a leftist issue or whatever, at least when it comes to this, is starting to collapse. Thank God, right? And I don't mean that flippantly, really. The other divides are there, we know. But yeah, I think we are being called to renew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm at one level excited about that. On the other level, what it calls me to do is look at what I am holding tightly to in a much more serious way, in a more analytical way.
Yep.
And not just, here's my set of behaviors that need to be fixed, but really what's my heart saying towards so many areas of my life, from my consumption to the way I claim Jesus to how I'm operating with the poor, the way I articulate the gospel and practice the gospel in the world. So,
yeah, when you get into the demands of the gospel, like what it really demands everything.
Mm-hmm.
It supplies what it demands in that there is grace that motivates you, but it doesn't leave any area unscathed. So if you think you're going to get it right, you're not. But also as a Christian, grace is not a pass to not care.
Yeah.
In any area, whether it's spiritual renewal or daily practices or worship or the environment or, the lives of the unborn or the prisoner or the soldier in the other country or any of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the temptation is, when you hear something like this, is to get very overwhelmed.
Yes.
And I think the beauty of it is that God has put a particular call for a particular thing in front of you, and it's undeniable.
Yeah.
And it's just the first step. You do not need to figure everything out.
You can't do everything.
Just do the thing that's put in front of you.
Yep. I agree.
So.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, man. Thanks for chatting that through. Sorry, quick breakfast, but
hey, quick breakfast, man. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.